Hello everyone. So welcome to episode 24 of Teh Tarik with Walid, and today I am delighted to have a friend of mine who will be the guest. He's Dr. Elvin Ong. He's an assistant professor at NUS at the Political Science Department at NUS. By the way, can you guys tell me if you are able to hear me, because my phone is spoiled, so I'm using my wife's phone, so I'm not sure whether we have the setup correct. So those of you are here, can you just type if you can hear me? Irfan or anybody else, Masagos, can you just type if you can hear me? Because I'm using a different phone this time. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so we will be having Dr. Elvin Ong on, and he will be talking about opposition politics. So we have Ho Yong here as well. So this is a recently published book by Ethos Books, Voting in a Time of Change. So it's an edited volume by Professor Kevin Tan and Professor Terence Lee from Australia, not the Terence Lee from NUS. So in this book, Dr. Elvin Ong has a chapter with Professor Terence Lee from NUS on the PSP. By the way, do get this book. Hello guys. So there's a lot of gems in this book. I've read it, and for instance, the chapter on claims of gerrymandering, right? So this was by Professor Kevin Tan. Delineation and Discretion, the Drawing of Electoral Boundaries in Singapore. So that's the title of the chapter. And then we have a chapter by Lok Ho Yong, who's the author of a couple of books on opposition politics in Singapore. I would say he's the authority on opposition politics in Singapore. He wrote this chapter entitled Hard Truths or Hard Choices, GE 2020's Economic Issues in Political and Global Context. And Dr. Elvin Ong, together with Professor Terence Lee, the title of their chapter is called The Progress Singapore Party in GE 2020, Its History, Organization, Campaign and Performance in Comparative Perspective. Okay, so do get this book by Ethos, and I think it's definitely worth a read, and it's an easy read as well. And the thing about edited volumes is you don't have to read it. It's not a monograph, right? So you can choose which chapters you want to read. Of course, you should read all of them, but maybe some chapters are more palatable or more interesting to you guys. So that's for today's session. So let me invite Elvin. I don't know whether he's on. I didn't see his name. So let me invite him on and start this session. And Elvin is one of the young up and coming professors. Hi. Hello, Elvin. How are you?
Hey,
Hi.
Walid. I'm
Hi.
good.
Yeah. So I was just talking you up. So I was saying you're one of
Oh,
the
okay.
young up and coming professors in Singapore, whom I think and I hope will appear in the next election, during the TV analysis. It's about time we got
Hopefully.
different voices. So thank you so much for doing this. Elvin is
No
in New York
problem.
right now
Thank you for
because
hosting.
you wanna tell them, and you wanna introduce yourself a little.
Sure. So I'm in New York City right now. I'm visiting family over here. But in my professional life, I teach political science at the National University of Singapore. I just joined recently, started on the tenure track as assistant professor on 1st January. So far, the classes I'm teaching in NUS is political inquiry, which is the basic research methodology class for pol science majors in NUS. And I also teach Malaysian politics. So I kind of split my time evenly between looking at Malaysian politics and looking at Singapore politics, and also looking kind of at like Southeast Asian politics.
Okay, great. So
So
a lot of
yeah.
people want to know the the resemblance between opposition politics in Singapore and Malaysian opposition politics. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Sure.
So today we are here because we want to help publicize Ethos Books' latest publication. This is the third, right, in the trilogy of
Yes.
election books by the two editors. So I think in the previous one I had a chapter in as well, but not the 2011 one. And I think there's a lot in here, but your specialty is opposition politics, right?
Yes.
And opposition coalitions. That's your bread and butter, right? Right.
Yes.
And so let's start off. Let's discuss that. And hopefully today, because I think a lot of people want an early night because they want to catch the final later.
Yes. It's happening in what? 3 a.m. right?
3 a.m. Yeah. So we'll try to keep it within 60 minutes. Yeah, I know. I'm contemplating that, but we'll see how it goes. So maximum 1 hour, hopefully. So first of all, PSP, Progress Singapore Party, right? So a lot of people think it's the second largest opposition party in Singapore. I disagree, but I mean, you can share your thoughts. But what is the grade that you would give PSP now if you were to assess them, right? Their performance in Parliament over the past year is a term paper, right? What is the grade that you would give them?
So, I mean, if you buy the book and you read the chapter that I co-authored with Terrace Lee of NUS, so we have a whole chapter on the Progress Singapore Party. And there we kind of gave it kind of like a, I would say kind of an average grade in terms of its performance during the campaign,
so
right?
That's because B or B plus?
I would say like a solid B, or maybe B minus. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a whole ton of reasons why we said that, right? So, buy the book and get it and read it for yourself. From now, after a year from the election, again, I would say kind of like bordering between, I would say the grade would be bordering between like a C plus or B minus.
Whoa. I don't want to be your student, man. You're such a harsh.
Really? I mean, I think a B minus would be kind of a solid average kind of thing. And I say, for a couple of reasons. So this overall grade can be broken down, I think, into 3 components, right? Parliamentary performance, internal organization, and what I kind of think to be mass communications, right? I think in terms of parliamentary performance, I would kind of give it a solid B. Some people would say it has been lackluster. Both Munwai and Hazel have been kind of pinned back rather than being able to push the government on certain issues, right? But I think we have to understand the total context of Parliament, right? There are only 2 NCMPs. They have limited research resources, limited financial resources. In a sea of PAP MPs where there are like 83 PAP MPs, how effective do you think they can be, right? Let's just say you're playing soccer with 2 people on one side and 83 people on the other side. Do you think the team with 2 people can score a goal, right? So basically, I think to have survived up till now and to have somewhat forced a robust discussion on SICA and FTAs, I think that's admirable enough already. So it's like a solid B or B plus, right? In terms of overall context. In terms of internal organization, they have had a leadership change with the new CEC. And I think it's kind of like also a B minus, right? Because I look at it in terms of 2 ways. Number one is the representation of women. And he has 5 women out of 14 members in the CEC. So that is better than the Workers' Party. The Workers' Party has 4 out of 14. And that is better than the PAP, which is 3 out of 18 for women. In terms of ethnic minorities, the PSP has like 3 out of 14, which is not so great. Workers' Party has 4 out of 14, and the PAP has 4 out of 18. So actually, in terms of like women and in terms of ethnic minorities, the PAP scores the worst. So it is kind of good for women for PSP, but somewhat less poor for ethnic minorities. So I think on average, like B minus. And I think the last thing is mass communications, right? So by mass comm, I mean you're trying to engage the public through your various channels like WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and all these kind of channels. I think on this front, it's pretty uneven. So Facebook and Instagram, it seems to be doing well with kind of like nice graphics to present its points across, sort of kind of following what the Workers' Party does. But I'm a subscriber to their WhatsApp, Telegram, and YouTube pages, right? So, and those are like pretty bad. So
Okay.
for WhatsApp, like their last message in their public channel was on 1st April.
Right.
In Telegram, their last message was on 2nd June. And YouTube is a bit of a mess because you have parliamentary speeches and then you have clips of some forums and then sometimes you have very weird music videos. So overall, I would kind of give it like...
Do they have a TikTok channel?
They do have a TikTok channel, but okay, so here is where I'm showing my age, right? I don't have TikTok, so I can't evaluate their TikTok.
Good on you, yeah.
But they do have TikTok, so you can give them some plus points for that. So
Okay,
overall, I would say like B minus, B, yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay. So there's a lot in what you said. So Elvin and I, we are born in the same year, so we're about 28 this year, plus minus 20% discount. Yeah. So you mentioned that there are 3 components, right? Parliamentary performance, the internal composition, and you focus specifically on diversity, right? And
Yes.
And the third one would be mass communication. So, but surely all of them are not at, you do not judge them on equal weightage? You do not give them equal weightage? Or would you say it's 33.33 each, or would you say it's 60%?
I would say it's equal.
Oh, really?
weightage.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
so
I don't think you can. I think all 3 are important for like the continuity of the party and for its like image building, brand building in the public's eyes. So the better they can do on all these 3 things, the better they can pull up for the overall party.
All right. So I wanted to pick up on what you said, the first point especially, before I get to the second point. So the parliamentary performance, a lot of people are critical of them, and even myself, I'm a bit critical of some aspects and some policy proposals of their in Parliament. However, the fact that they got the PAP to come up on CISA and on free trade, and they have moved the conversation, right? For sure, right? I think that's a win for them. If people didn't know them before this week, I think now many more people know them. And I don't agree with some or much of the rhetoric that's been pushed by them, but I cannot deny that a lot of Singaporeans actually believe what they believe, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think absolutely. I agree with what you say in the sense that you may not necessarily agree with them, but they do have a particular stance, and their particular stance is kind of resonating with a particular group of people in Singapore, right? Yeah. And I'm sure the PAP recognizes that as well. That's why they are taking effective steps to try to engage.
Exactly. The fact that the PAP responded means they recognize that this is not a fringe narrative, right? Yeah. All right. So the second one, I'm very wary of, not that diversity is not important, diversity is super important, but I'm very wary of superficial diversity, right? Where you have gender diversity, you have ethnic diversity, but then there's no ideological diversity, or there's no ideational diversity. So do you think they have enough of that in the PSP?
Wow, that's a tough question. I would say I actually have no idea. Because if in order to kind of have the sense of the answer to that question, I would have to go and ask every one of the CEC, right? To say what's your position on this and position on that. I think I think so far what it seems is like the party seems to be fairly united on a particular strategy on trying to push the PAP government on this issue of foreign talent, this issue of PMETs, right? So I think the party seems to be fairly united in that. There doesn't seem to be kind of rhetoric on Facebook that say they disagree with their own party, right? So I think they seem to be fairly united on that. For example, you can see like, you can think about like, okay, the comparison, let's say with the Workers' Party. Is there diversity within the Workers' Party, or is there more of a unity in ideology within the Workers' Party? There, I would say, again, I'm not so sure, right? I have to go and poll every single
Right.
person. But maybe from the rhetoric of their speeches in Parliament, we can maybe infer something about, which MP is more interested in certain issues rather than others. But
Right.
again, that's a function of like maybe some portfolio they're assigned to talk more about rather than the kind of like the genuine belief. So with just two people speaking, Hazel and Manwai, I'm not so sure I can make
Right,
a
right.
exact
Whether we can
determination.
assess that. Okay, okay, fair enough. So, I think it's interesting you brought up Workers' Party, right? Because, I mean, we can see that probably on a personal level there is ideological diversity, right? On a personal level, like you would say, Raisa is not the same as Faisal or not the same as Leon, right? However, what matters is not their personal beliefs per se, right? What matters is the image that is projected, and
Right.
they run a tight ship, right? At the Workers' Party, they're
Yeah.
always careful not to show that there's any dissent, and in that sense, it's similar to PAP. But the PSP has been less successful in that, in terms of public falling out. Do you want to have any? Do you want to comment on that?
Well, if you read the book chapter,
Chapter. Yes.
you will
You did
be, if
comment
you
on
read
that.
between the lines and very carefully in certain sentences, you will be able to read before the elections, there was already a CEC reshuffling. And
Right.
that CEC reshuffling was basically a kind of a reflection on how I think Dr. Tan Cheng Bock was trying to like bring in certain people to replace other people, right? But now with the new CEC again, the newspapers they want to sensationalize certain kind of
Right.
like dissent within the ranks, right? So they
Right.
say,
Right.
oh,
Right. Right.
there's dissent between here and there. I think dissent within the ranks of any political party, it's kind of a very normal thing. And
Absolutely.
the Workers' Party has that too.
Absolutely.
And who is to say that the PAP doesn't have that, right? The
Absolutely.
PAP could have that too. It's just that they project a certain image
Right.
that says that, oh, all thing is fine within the PAP. So I
Right.
think we got to be a bit more careful discerning whether is there actual fracturing within the ranks, or is it normal just dissent? People can disagree within the party,
Right.
right? And people can choose different leaders to support within the party. So I think seeing this kind of dissension and this kind of disagreement is a perfectly normal thing.
Right.
And I don't think we should necessarily buy into every newspaper article trying to sensationalize this dissent.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I absolutely agree. I think that was a good piece of analysis. And if I could just add, also PSP is very new, so it's very very normal, I guess, for them to figure out some people, because at the start, obviously, they'll just accept as many people as possible, right? So there are a couple of comments here that I would like to take. One by Prof Yan Chong, your colleague, one of my friends, mentors, and he's saying I should do a TikTok performance, but it ain't coming home, so don't worry about that. Iggy Pereira says, shouldn't the weightage for parliamentary performance be higher though, because history has shown that NCMPs can make the jump to being a fully elected MP with good parliamentary performances? Do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, so that, what's his name again? Iggy.
Yeah,
Is
Iggy.
it?
Yeah, Iggy.
Yeah, so it could be for Iggy that he weighs parliamentary performance more. And so from his personal point of view, he is very, he doesn't really care about, what's the representation on the CEC. He doesn't really care about, whether their WhatsApp channels or Telegram channels are working. And he solely focuses on parliamentary performance. And, that could be how he evaluates the party. And that is perfectly legitimate, right? The point about history showing that NCMP can potentially jump to to be a full-time member of parliament? Like, what's the record on that? The record on that is what, 2 data points? Like, it's
Maybe
Aljunied,
3: Sylvia, Gerald, and Leon.
Sylvia, Gerald, and Leon, and that is all through Aljunied, right?
Yeah, and yeah. So that's
So you have n equals of 3.
Yeah. N equals
And
to, yeah.
what
Right,
kind of
right. Fair
record is
enough.
that, right?
Fair enough. And also
So
there's all sorts of confounding variables, right? The party brand, and
yeah, the
that
party must
specific.
do good enough
Exactly.
such that
Right.
they become the best loser in the first place, and then the
Right.
next election they'll cross over the
Right.
50% threshold, right?
Yeah.
So there are other variables in play, I think.
Sure. And you also had other people for whom it didn't work out, right? Like Steve Chia and Lina
Mm-hmm,
Chow.
mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's
Yeah,
another.
yeah. So
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
if you take into account Steve Chia and Lina Cham, they were NCMPs too. So that is what 3 success and 2 failures,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
so that's like what, a 50-50 chance.
Right. Yeah. And of course, you had others who didn't. Like Daniel
Yeah.
Go is not a data point because he didn't contest. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for that. Thanks for that. Angie asks, is it fair to grade opposition parties on diversity when there are huge obstacles to joining, and perhaps people with more privilege would be more inclined to join opposition? So it's easier for people with more
Oh,
privilege?
easier for people with more privilege to join the
The
opposition.
opposition because the costs are higher, right?
It could, I think it could go both ways, right? In a sense, if you're a very successful businessman and you're very, in a sense, that then or businesswoman, and you're very privileged, and then you join the opposition party, there's a high cost as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That you expose your company to,
Yeah,
some kind of political affiliation, right? And
right,
then you might lose business as a result.
right.
So from that point of view, privilege is not really very good if you get into the opposition.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. So there
Yeah.
is a cost no matter what. People think that,
Yeah.
yeah, when people say there's nothing to lose, right? I mean, everybody
Yeah.
has something to lose. It's just how much, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
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 Carry on. Carry on.
And so I was also thinking, well, okay, fine. Some people may be privileged, some in the position in life to enter to opposition party, to get into the CEC, but the work that is done, that is needed to be done, of like, I don't know, knocking on doors, in volunteering time and effort and resources to do certain outreach for the party. That's all really very tough, tough job to do. Maybe someone with less resources is less able to contribute,
Right. Okay.
and someone with more resources may be more able to contribute, and maybe that's how kind of like the privilege plays in. But ultimately, if someone with better resources goes in, exposes themselves, they also have a lot to lose, potentially
Right.
lose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that. So there are a couple of comments on the foreign workers and populism and xenophobia. I'll get to that in the next question. But before that, I would like to take Ho Yong's question, and he asked, is it fair to make this division that the PSP is a party of ex-establishment figures, whereas the WP is a party of younger figures tackling more liberal issues like climate change and racial justice?
Well, I think political parties will try to do and say things whatever that will benefit them politically, right? So if the Workers' Party believes that there's a significant segment of the population that is interested in issues like climate change, then they will think actively of ways to craft policies, right? To
So
speak to
opposition parties are
people.
more reactionary to public sentiment, you think, than the PAP perhaps, because the PAP both tries to shape and follow public sentiment, right? Do you think, based on what you just said, the opposition has less liberty to shape and they have to follow public opinion more?
To some extent, the opposition is definitely constrained by what they perceive to be what the public can accept. Right? Because if they stray too extreme on a particular issue, right? For, let's say if they go too extremist green and they say we should ban off for use of fossil fuels in Singapore, to next year, right? Then the PAP can potentially just pounce on that and say,
Right.
that's too idealistic and
Right.
that's not what people want, all that sort of thing. So to some extent, the opposition parties are definitely constrained, but and so probably I agree with you to say that they you would call it reactionary to the people's sentiments on the ground. I would say they are just doing what is politically strategically advantageous for them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas PAP in the government, well, they set the narrative, right? So
Right.
they can react to the narrative, they can change the narrative, they can influence the narrative because
Right.
they're so dominant, right?
Right.
So so I think people need to be a little bit more attuned to like the strategic realities of like what can be controlled and what can't be controlled, and
Right.
which party is more vulnerable to attacks.
All right. Okay. So this is a very political sciencey session. So and we are getting a lot of good questions as well. So I think this is the last one I'm going to take for now, and then we'll move on to the populism question. So how do you think ideological differences within a party can or should be managed? This is by collective. Given that there's a very fine balance between having a united public front versus sufficient internal discourse. That's an excellent question, right? Because all parties need to balance this, right? You don't want to appear disunited. At the same time, you do not want to appear as if, you do not want to show people as if there's groupthink within the party. So how do you balance
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
I've never run a political party before, so I don't know. I
Well,
would
you study
assume...
political parties, so you can hazard a guess. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move across the causeway to Malaysia, right? If you allow too much dissent to be demonstrated in public, right? If you allow too much ideological disunity to be leaked into public, that can significantly puncture the party branding and foster more dissent, right? And diminish the party standing. So if you look at Parti Keadilan Rakyat, if you look at the Democratic Action Party (DAP), there is particular significant dissent within their ranks, right? And that has not helped them over the years. Yeah. So, and they oftentimes have to come out to publicly denounce their own party member.
Right.
So I think if a leader of an opposition party was kind of a little bit more astute, they would say, okay, if you have dissent, let's talk behind closed doors. But in the public, we have to put up a united front. So I think as members of the public, when we read the newspapers and try to evaluate the opposition parties or evaluate all political parties, we shouldn't necessarily assume that parties are monolithic, right? So we shouldn't assume that, the PAP just thinks this way.
Right.
There could be significant dissent within the PAP itself, but we don't know. Right. And I think the same goes for all the other opposition parties. I think discipline, discipline is a more kind of a politically, strategically advantaged quality which they want to show to the public. If there is dissent, Pritam Singh can always come out and say, the party members have many views on this,
right.
And but we have decided as a party we will have this particular stance.
Right.
So you can just clarify it in one sentence.
Okay, thanks. So there are a couple of questions, and that was going to be my next question also by We the Loving Critics and Shut Shooter. So basically, the trope or the claim that PSP is becoming more populist and more xenophobic, how do you assess that?
So I would say I don't think the PSP has become more populist or xenophobic. I would say it's general public rhetoric and public rhetoric of its concerns have always been somewhat populist. Right? I wouldn't say it has gone higher over time. I would say it has kind of maintained that level. Their criticism of like policies like Sika has always been there. I was at the launch of their political party held at the Swiss Hotel Merchant Court in August 2019. And at the launch, there was a Q&A session where they kind of talk a little bit about policy. And when they talk about policy, it was Sika. At the very start of the political party, it was Sika already.
Right.
So it is, and Sika has been has a long-standing issue going on since way before the pandemic, and this issue about foreign talent, this issue about PMETs, right?
And even before PSP, right? Before the existence
before
of
PSP, right? You already have the Singapore's first party,
right.
by Dr. Tanji Se. So you know. To some extent, you could say, you know, PSP is just co-opting supporters,
to
amplify the issue.
It's not a Manwai thing, right? It is a party platform. Nobody can say that this is Long Manwai doing it on his own and PSP should sack him. Yeah, all right. Okay.
Yeah, and I also want to make another point in the sense that I would be very careful about the use of the word xenophobic. Right. And on this, I actually really like Pritam Singh's most recent speech that he gave to the Singapore International Chamber of Commerce. So if you guys are not familiar with the speech, you can go on to the Leader of the Opposition website. He has put up the speech. I think whoever wrote the speech for him or him writing the speech for himself is pretty good. And he gave, at that speech, he made a clear distinction to say, okay, xenophobia must be rejected, but sentiments of nativism can be understood. And these sentiments of nativism are legitimate and can be addressed through progressive legislation, which is what the PAP has agreed as well.
Right. I think nativism perhaps PSP's biggest achievement, right? Pushing the PAP to say that outright, right?
Yeah, and nativism, Pritam defines as, I quote, the desire of governments and people to protect the interests of native-born and established residents in preference to those of foreigners. Right? And nativism, while largely seen in pejorative terms in global cities and globalization, is an entirely predictable emotion and goes to the core of the meaning of citizenship and the relationship between citizens and the state. Right? People naturally act in their self-interest and prefer policies that promote the community's self-interest. Right. So I think this is kind of a perfectly understandable sentiment, and to a large extent, most countries around the world, they have policies that privilege their own citizens.
Of course.
I did my postdoc in Canada. And so recently I was looking up Canada's policy about allowing people into the country. And Canada is only allowing fully vaccinated citizens to go back without quarantine. They're not allowing even fully vaccinated foreigners to go in. Right? Is that a nativist policy? Yeah, it is a nativist policy, because every country should have policies that look out for their own citizens. Right? So if you say Singapore government is nativist, you can say Canada's government is nativist, American government is nativist. A lot of governments in the world are nativist.
Right. Yeah. I mean, every country in the world, right, would differentiate to some extent, at least, between citizens and non-citizens, right? So I completely agree with you. I think, unfortunately, some, if not a lot, of the criticism surrounding Sika does veer or venture into the xenophobic zone, but not all. Just because somebody criticizes Sika doesn't mean that that person is automatically xenophobic, right? We must look at the substance of the criticism. All right. Yeah. So thanks for that. I think that is quite clear. So I noticed you were quite careful to say that, in your answers, you were quite careful to ensure that you didn't say that the PSP is being xenophobic, right? So you don't think that they are. They have ventured into that yet.
So they have repeatedly come out to put statements. I could be wrong. You can check their Facebook page, right? To say that they are not against free trade agreements.
Yes, they did
They
say
are
that.
not. They are not against foreign workers, but what they are concerned about is the balance,
Right. Okay.
and whether this balance that the PAP has adopted disadvantages Singaporean workers.
Right.
And so I think it's quite legitimate to argue about this balance.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's a policy criticism.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And
Thank you
we
for that.
can definitely have policy disagreement in Singapore.
Okay. Thanks. So now the next question: can PSP survive without Dr. Tan Cheng Bock, assuming he runs in the next presidential election, even if that's even possible, or let's say he retires from politics?
Yeah.
Can the PSP survive?
The problem is like political scientists, social scientists, we are not very good at predicting the future.
But I'm forcing you to.
Yeah. So
That's
I can
true.
only make
We
an
are not,
educated
guess.
I can only make an educated guess, right?
Right.
I think it will depend on two significant things. The first one is whether they can make a breakthrough in the next general election by winning a GRC first. If they can win a GRC, then there is a higher likelihood that they will be able to survive if into future election cycles if Dr. Tan steps down, right? If they cannot win a GRC, then it is very difficult to build a party brand, to build a party machinery, because winning a GRC means you are in charge of a particular geographical
Right.
area, you're in charge of a town council, you have to it kind of forces you to build an organization,
Right.
right? It
Right.
forces you to bring in volunteers, to formalize your volunteers, to set up party procedures and structures. If they don't win a GRC, then it's like, okay, same goes the next
Right.
year, same goes the next year. Yeah.
Right.
The second thing about whether they can so-called survive in a post, if Dr. Tan steps down, is whether they can attract more outstanding members to join them. Particularly maybe outstanding members from the PAP, right?
Oh, so you're looking at more defectors. You think that's the way to
not
go?
necessarily so-called defectors lah, just people change party affiliation lah. Let's just say. Defection is like,
that's a synonym for defect. No, so do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's interesting that why specifically do you think? Is it the PSP is made to be the party of defectors, or?
Okay, if you want to use the word defectors, let's use the word defectors.
Okay.
From the start, the PSP has tried to although it's kind of lessened now, has tried to say that we were the PAP of the past, right? Now the today's PAP has gone out of touch. Now whether that is true or not,
it's a different matter.
we have our own evaluation lah. Right? But the fact that is they brand themselves a certain way, and some people may actually feel that resonates with them, and so it wouldn't be surprising if certain PAP members feel that I really don't agree with some of the policies of the PAP, and therefore I might want to help the PSP instead. Right? And or if ordinary members of Singaporeans or Singaporeans out there say, well, I could potentially volunteer my time. I could volunteer for either the Workers' Party or the PSP or the PAP, right? And I kind of don't really feel the thing with PAP, so maybe I want to try out volunteering my time with Workers' Party or the PSP. I stay in Jurong, so Workers' Party too far away, so maybe I just invest my time in PSP, right? So I do think that they could potentially attract more grassroots members, but maybe they could also attract potential more candidate level kind of stars, right? If you see how the Workers' Party kind of built itself up over time, they also attracted stars to join them, right? Like, Chen Xiaomao, and to some extent Daniel as well, and James. Right? So stars can be, I hate to put it this way, but let's just call them stars. Huh? Stars can be advantageous and disadvantages at the same time. But the way in their advantages is that they bring a lot of visibility to your party.
Right.
And one way to move on from Dr. Tan would be to have another star.
Right. But then you are transferring the problem somewhat, unless you have a few stars.
Yeah, that's right. So to some extent, Workers' Party started with 1 or 2 stars, right? Then the other stars gradually grew over time, and then you have a more even dispersion of stars.
Okay.
Right. So PSP is still at the growing stage.
Right. Okay. So I think that's a fair piece of analysis, and I just wanted to say why on earth did you mention star without mentioning Nicole Seah? I mean, I don't understand. But anyway,
that's true. So, I mean, that's the good thing about Workers' Party, right? In the sense that they have a lot of stars,
Absolutely. So it's not dependent on anybody.
Raisa is one herself. James is one herself.
Right.
So
as much as I am a fan of Nicole, if she left, probably Workers' Party would, in all likelihood, Workers' Party would survive, right? As in, and that's the case for James and even Pritam, I would say, right? But you cannot say the same. Although for Pritam, the impact would be more devastating, but you probably cannot say the same for PSP at this point in time, right? Okay, so now this on to your bread and butter, because you've done a lot of work on opposition alliances throughout the world, right? So, and the question we always hear, and one of the things that the media was harping on as well, why is it that the opposition parties didn't coalesce? Why didn't they form a coalition? And a lot of Singaporeans also ask, right? Why don't the opposition parties just come together? And you are the perfect person to answer that question. So why don't they come together?
So now would be the perfect time to publicize the book again, to say in the book chapter that I wrote with Terence Lee, we do, on the Progress Singapore Party, we do have a short section on why, kind of explaining and half describing the absence of forming an opposition alliance in Singapore. But to be more direct to answer your question, I think the simple answer is that there's just no benefit from a party leader's point of view to form an alliance. Right? What do you hope to achieve? That's the first question that party leaders will ask themselves is, what do you hope to achieve if you form an alliance?
To topple the PAP, right?
Do you want to topple the PAP, or do you want to win 1 or 2 more GRCs? If you want to win 1 or 2 more GRCs, you can do that without an alliance.
Right.
And it's why would the Workers' Party want to form an alliance with, say, the SDP when there's nothing in it for them?
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, why would you want to work with someone else on the project work when you can secure an A on the project yourself?
If you think that person doesn't bring anything that you can benefit from.
Yeah. And actually, that person may be a drag on you, you want to work with that person on the project, then, that person doesn't put in any effort, or that person quarrels with you, or the person tries to steal your limelight, and then you get less credit for the project.
Right.
So you're not even sure if the project will secure an A or not, right?
Right.
So let's just, so there are benefits and costs.
Right. So the biggest impediment to the opposition alliance is basically Workers' Party, right? Because they don't need the other parties. Is that
they don't need that, or they perceive that they don't need the other parties.
They perceive, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for the rest of the opposition parties, right, their goals are also a little bit more moderate. Their goal is not to topple the PAP, right? Their goal is to win 1 GRC, 1 SMC, 2 GRCs, 2 SMCs, perhaps. And in evaluation of the costs and benefits, they evaluate, this is a hypothesis lah, huh? They evaluate that, well, if I were to, let's say SDP wants to work with the PSP, right? Or PSP wants to work with the SDP. They evaluate that, well, I could potentially win a GRC with SDP's help, but there's also a lot of cost involved, right? I have to like tie myself to SDP's party brand. I have to maybe form a common policy with them. Do I actually even agree with SDP's policies? Actually, I don't even know my policies. How would I want to like merge with like SDP's policies, right? Do I want to coordinate with them on like campaigning organization in terms of like lorries lah, or like posters lah, that sort of thing? All those coordination costs that you have to deal with, right?
Right.
And so is it worth it? Like if you think a lot about the costs, and who's going to listen to each other? Is Tan Cheng Bock going to say, okay, I'm going to listen to what Chee Soon Juan says? Or is Chee Soon Juan going to say, I'm going to listen to what Tan Cheng Bock says?
Right.
If you think of all the costs involved and what are the potential benefits, yeah, probably let's just do this ourselves.
Right. So using the Malaysian experience, right? Because you mentioned the cost that Tan Cheng Bock would have to consider if he were to align with Dr. Chee, right? But the cost for Mahathir would be much higher, right? In considering that he has to align with Anwar and vice versa, right? Yet they did it. So is it fair to say that if there's an actual possibility of toppling the PAP, or at least if that's the perception of the parties, then you would see an alliance because the benefit far outweighs the cost?
Yeah, so in Malaysia, that is what we mostly observe, right? The cost of cooperation is very high. Let's say the Democratic Action Party is a more secularist party, and CAS is a more Islamic party. Right. For them to come together to try to find some common ideological ground is very costly. Right? And you mentioned Mahathir working with Anwar. For them to work together, it's very costly.
Right.
But on the flip side, the potential benefit of the forming an alliance is very high.
Right.
The DAP can benefit from having more Malay Muslim votes. The PAS can benefit from more non-Malay Muslim votes.
Right.
And so they can what we say pool the votes together, right?
Right.
And the BN in 1999, in 2013, in 2018, the BN was actually pretty vulnerable from the perspective of that time.
Right.
And so these parties thought that, hey, wait a minute, there's a lot of people really don't like the incumbent party. Right. People are protesting on the streets. They are being arrested. There are water cannons on the streets, all that sort of thing. And people are really expressing their dissent. And we really think that the BN is ready to fall. And that's why the benefits are very high,
right,
as compared to the cost.
Right. Okay.
In Singapore, are there water cannons on the streets?
Right. So there are no signals at all that the PAP is in actual danger of losing power, which is why.
There's no danger of the PAP losing, at least in the near term.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So I think there's a healthy discussion here between NJ and Prof Chong and Alpha Spectre and about avoiding three-cornered fights. And because I've attended your talks and I am aware of the other book that you're going to publish, your own book, which I want you to talk about as well, as in just publicize it for a while. So can you just briefly explain to us the difference between a coalition and opposition coordination?
Yeah, so a coalition is when they contains two things. Number one, they opposition parties avoid contesting with each other in every single constituency. They avoid three-cornered fights. And the second thing is they coordinate with each other on, say, policy, on organization. They have a common manifesto, common logo, common color, common internal organization. So they have same posters, design and everything. In Singapore, we have the first one, the avoiding three-corner fights, but we don't have the second one, right? And the second one is like, to put it loosely, is coordination of campaign, whereas the first one is coordination on where you contest.
Right.
And in Singapore, we have coordination on three-cornered fights because that is a very logical, rational thing to do. Because you know that if you go into a three-cornered fight, that the opposition will surely lose. Right? At least if you coordinate with each other, there is some cost. You have to withdraw from certain areas. Right? And other parties will have to withdraw from other areas. But you have the added benefit of pooling all the opposition votes and potentially just, increasing and maximizing your chances of winning.
Right.
Because if you go into a three-corner fight, there's a general sense, the general perception is like, oh, you'll surely fail because you split the opposition votes.
Right.
And that is what we see that has happened in the past.
Right.
So parties before elections, when they come together to so-called horse trade, to so-called coordinate, to avoid contesting with each other, is a very rational, logical thing to do. And many other political parties around the world, especially opposition parties, they do that to avoid contesting with each other.
Right. So it's fair to say that the absence of a coalition in Singapore, an opposition coalition, but the presence of opposition coordination shows that the parties are behaving completely rationally, right? It's not about, as people like to say, it's about egos and all of that. I mean, surely Chee Soon Juan and Tan Cheng Bock don't have bigger egos than Mahathir and Anwar, right?
So I would say egos play into the cost.
Right. So that's part of the cost. Right. So if the benefit is enough, they can swallow the ego. That's okay.
Yeah, they can swallow the ego. So that is, and I don't want to totally sell this as a so-called rational kind of game theory kind of thing. It is a lot is about perception,
right?
And to some extent, whether this perception is certain or not certain, right? Because you can't say with 100% certainty, oh, if we form an alliance, we will definitely topple Barisan Nasional, right? It is they perceive that if we form an alliance, then we have a higher likelihood of toppling Barisan Nasional.
Right, okay.
And so the perception, you have to ask the opposition party leaders at the time, or you can have to infer from the speeches that they make, or infer from some third-party sources, right? This is like bringing together evidence to try to triangulate what is their perception at that time.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And perceptions can change,
Right. Yeah, when conditions change, perceptions change, right? So, so Prof. Yuan Chong said that so there are a couple of comments here. Can it be that the alliances are more tenable in Malaysia because of the bigger numbers? I don't see why that would be the case. Do you see
bigger numbers of what?
As in Singapore seats are much fewer, therefore it's harder for opposition coalition to form. Well, the opposition parties in Malaysia are also bigger, so than the opposition parties in Singapore. So
So if we talk about just coordinating on the no three-cornered fights, right? It's actually much easier to coordinate in Singapore because you only have 20, 30, 40 districts to coordinate. In Malaysia, you have 222 districts to coordinate. Okay. So the difficulty is not there. The difficulty is at the level of campaign coordination. Whether party leaders, they want to listen to each other in terms of policy, they want to listen to each other in terms of organization, they want to listen to each other in terms of, who gets to speak first. So you can imagine like an alliance with a press conference. In Malaysia, Mahathir speaks first, then Anwar. Right? And then Lim Guan Eng, right? And then Mat Sabu. Right? In Singapore, you have a press conference alliance. Who speaks first?
Right.
Like, they'll be grabbing the mics with each other.
Right.
Maybe, okay, Tan Cheng Bock
Tan Cheng Bock
speaks
would go
first.
first, right? Presumably, then Chee
But
Soon Juan.
after that, like, some other Lim Chin will say he gets to speak first. Or like,
Will Linton be at the table? Will he be? As in, and I'm not making fun of him, right? This is a serious question. Beyond
yeah, it's a
PSP and
serious question.
SDP, beyond PSP and SDP, right? Would they even consider an alliance with People's Voice and SDA? And would Dr. Tan actually consider that?
Yeah, so that is a question that you have to ask Dr. Tan himself, lah. Right?
Right.
And I'm sure he has a lot of consideration of the cost in mind when
Right.
he thinks about whether he wants to work with all these other people.
Right.
He can have control of his own party and determine how the party puts out campaign messages, or he has to coordinate with, Mr. Tanji Singh, Mr. Chee Soon Juan on campaign coordination, putting what message. So does he really want to do that, or does he want
Yeah.
like more control of his party?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my guess, right, I have no 100% certainty, but my guess would be that he would rather more control of his own party in the first place,
Right.
unless some dynamic changes, lah.
Okay. So there's a discussion here between Prof. Chong and Ho Yong about the Punggol East by-election, right, where there was actually 4-cornered fight, right? It wasn't a 3-cornered fight. And yet the opposition won. What I would say is the context is that happened after the presidential election, where there was a 4-cornered fight, which actually changed the outcome dramatically. And I think there was learning involved, the psychological effect of Duverger's law, right? So there was learning involved on the part of voters, right? Such that voters realize that they are not going to go for their number one preference, they are going to go for the opposition that is most likely to win. So therefore, moving forward, even if there were 3-cornered fights, if my hypothesis is correct, I don't think it would drastically affect the outcomes. What do you think?
So if there were 3-cornered fights, the Workers' Party, especially in the East, the Workers' Party would definitely say, I'm going to contest in these areas, and I don't care which opposition party is going to contest there. I know I'm going to draw at least 35% of the votes, and the other opposition party can lose their deposit. So if you're the other opposition party, do you really want to force the 3-cornered fight?
Right.
So from the Punggol East by-election, we can really see that the Singapore electorate is learning that, well, if there were more people interested in voting for the opposition, they'll vote for what they perceive, again, to be the stronger opposition.
Right.
And the strongest opposition perceived right now is the Workers' Party.
Right.
And both Kenneth Jayaratnam and I forgot who's the other guy, Desmond.
Yeah, Desmond.
They both lost their deposits, right?
Yeah, they got embarrassing percentage of the votes, right? 1.2 and 0.7 or something was horrible. So just to take that one step further, right? So we shouldn't be too worried about the number of parties, right? Because voters will sort them out, right? So it's okay even if you have more parties coming in, because this dynamic will play itself out and the strongest opposition party would get most of the votes anyway, right?
Yeah, so the number of parties will largely be determined by Workers' Party and Progress Singapore Party. So you can say they contest the most seats now. If they can contest more seats and they squeeze the smaller opposition parties out, then the smaller opposition parties will have to retreat, right? And they will have to contest in less and less places, or they will decide not to contest at all. So the stronger Workers' Party and PSP or SDP grows, the smaller opposition parties will decide to drop out.
Right. Okay.
And we're already kind of seeing that dynamic.
I agree. I think the presidential election, I think, was somewhat a turning point, even though people don't talk about it in terms of voter behavior. But I do think, I am quite sure those who voted for for Tan Ji Se, regret putting their vote with Tan Ji Se. I'm pretty sure, right? Because these are the people who definitely didn't want Tony Tan as president, right? And if they had known the effect of their votes, they would have voted for Tan Cheng Bock. So
and even
yeah,
Tan Kin Lian also got a sizable number of
he
votes.
got 4+%, but his one is a bit more difficult to pinpoint, right? As in, it could be there could be people who would vote for Tony Tan, or he could
But
just have a
even
large family, or
yeah, but even you see, if you say you give 2/3 of Tan Kin Lian supporters to Tan Cheng Bock and 1/3 of Tan Kin Lian supporters to the PAP, Tan Cheng Bock would have won, I think.
Yeah. Probably, yeah. So okay, so it's 1 hour already. So just final question before you have any final thoughts. Also, there's a comment, should have had a runoff election. Well, that's not the system, right? We cannot change the rules after the after the fact. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely benefits to a runoff election. So the final question, do you think, based on your study of opposition parties, do you think there's a chance for Dr. Chee Soon Juan to become an elected member of parliament? Do you think he has one more fight left in him?
I think he has many fights in him left. I think he is a very resilient person. He has, and he's still quite young, right? I think.
Yeah, relatively. I mean, young is relative, right?
Young is relative. Let me just.
We are also quite young.
Let me see.
He's 1962.
Yeah, 1962. He's 58 years old.
Yeah, 58, 59.
59. Oh, his birthday is coming
July.
up soon.
Yeah. 20 July. So yeah.
So let's say he has another 10 years ahead of him, right? He has a 10-year runway left. And so, I think within 10 years, could he potentially win at SMC? Sure, why not? Right? I don't think the SDP, the question is, if he steps down, like, does SDP have another star?
Prof Tambaya is the clear...
No, they are already kind of co-stars.
Right.
So assuming Professor Paul Tambaya stays where he is and someone else takes over Dr. Chee, is there anyone better in SDP? I'm not so sure. Right? And I think if you ask ordinary Singaporeans, hey, there's this party called Singapore Democratic Party. Who are the top 2-3 leaders? They will say Paul Tambaya, they say Chee Soon Juan, then they can't name anymore.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like it or not, both Professor Paul Tambaya and Dr. Chee are like the best hopes for SDP.
Right.
And if Dr. Chee ever steps down, then it'll be a real interesting question about whether SDP can survive.
Right. So I've always wondered about that, because there is a school of thought which also says that actually SDP will become stronger without Dr. Chee. Although I think you're right. He definitely, I mean, he's a fighter, right? For sure. Whether you like him, you don't like him, you cannot deny his resilience. And at least I think the 46% showing gave him at least one. It should give him one more opportunity, I think. Yeah, 46% is reasonable, I think. So there's a comment which is, I don't see why Min Chong isn't a rising star. Well, a rising star is not the same as a household name. I think even Min would agree that she is not.
Well, Min and
name.
I both come from SMU, and I think we were kind of in the same year.
Or? Oh, really?
I think around same batch. I think we may have been like same class together.
Was she from Paul Science also? Or?
I'm not sure whether she was Paul Science. Maybe
probably not.
Science.
Political scientists don't really become politicians, right?
Yeah. So I kind of my memory is failing me, but I kind of remember Min from my SMU days. I'm not sure if she remembers me at all.
So she's coming on Teh Tarik early August. So I'll ask her whether she remembers you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay if she doesn't remember me. I'm not worthy of
Yeah. So
remembering.
so I
But
think Min is not at the level that Elvin is talking about in terms of being a household name, right?
public
I
profile, in
Yeah,
terms of like
public
public
profile,
rhetoric, where does she stand
experience.
on certain
Exactly.
issues? We don't know.
Exactly. We don't know. Yeah. So yeah. So I look forward to that conversation. So, Elvin, are there any other thoughts you would like to share? You would like to get off your chest, and also you have a book that will be published next year with University of Michigan Press. Am I right? You
Yes.
want to briefly talk about
So
that? Yeah.
so in the forthcoming year, I will have a couple of publications out. So as Walid mentioned, I will have a book out with the University of Michigan Press next year, 2022. It will be on opposition alliances, forming opposition alliances, and that book compares formation of opposition alliance between Malaysia and Singapore over 50 years, and also the formation of opposition alliance in Philippines and South Korea in the 1980s.
Oh,
So for people who are really very interested in how opposition alliances form or do not form, please look forward to that book. I think further in the next couple of weeks, I also have a journal article out in party politics.
oh,
So that
congratulations.
looks, thank you. So that looks at the Malaysian opposition alliance on how they campaign, right, in the 2018 elections. So as I mentioned to you, there are two parts, right? So first part is, avoiding three-corner fights. Second part is coordinating their campaign
Right.
with each other. So this forthcoming article in Party Politics will be about the Malaysian opposition campaigning together with each other, which has
Okay.
really been quite understudied.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Elvin, for all your insights today and for coming on and for waking up early
Thanks, Walid.
on a Sunday in New York.
It's not
So
it's not that early lah. Now 11 already.
okay. So I'm quite sure that all of us will be seeing more of you over the next few years. And you definitely will not be joining politics, right? Or is that a door that is open for you?
Well, one can never say no, and we don't know
Well,
how Singapore will be transformed in the
well,
next 10, 20
you're already
years, right?
answering like a politician already.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't predict. I would say I answer like a social scientist. We can't predict the future, and I think don't underestimate how society can change over
Absolutely.
the medium to long term, especially in Singapore. I think we are seeing a lot of
Absolutely.
demographic changes
Absolutely.
and
And I think you wouldn't
changes in
notice the
political
change.
attitudes.
You wouldn't notice the change if you analyze it like day to day or over 5 or 6 months, right? But if you look at over 10 years, the discourses I've seen on Instagram in the past few months is remarkable. I know for sure 10 years ago this wouldn't have happened, right? Yeah,
Mm.
so who knows? So thank you so
And
much,
it's all
Elvin.
thanks
Yeah.
to people like you who are pushing the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. And just one final comment for everybody. It ain't coming home, so stop DMing me. Okay, good.
I'm looking forward to your TikTok performance.
It ain't coming home, don't worry. Okay, good night. Good night, everybody, and
Okay,
good day, Elvin.
take
Thank you
care.
so
Good night,
much. Bye-bye.
everyone. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.